Welcome to Finance 4910, International Financial Markets. In this chapter, we are going to learn about the history of the international monetary system, which is the foundation of this course. So paying close attention to this chapter will help you a great deal. Think about this. There are 195 nations trading among themselves using 164 currencies. So we have a very complex international monetary system. If there is a trade between a South Korean exporter and a Mexican importer, how will the trade be settled? The exporter would prefer a Korean won settlement, whereas the importer would prefer to make a payment in Mexican pesos. To understand these complex issues, we need to know the history of the international monetary system because it facilitates international trade. The current international monetary system has evolved over time and can be segmented into the following 5 time periods. Let's discuss each time period separately. The first time period was known as the period of the gold standard, and it lasted from 1876 to 1913. During this period, the United States fixed the value of the dollar at 20.67 US dollars per ounce of gold. The United Kingdom fixed the value of the British pound at 4.2474 British pounds per ounce of gold. So we can equate 20.67 US dollars to 4.2474 British pounds. And now we can say that the exchange rate between the dollar and the pound was 20.67 US dollars per 4.2474 British pounds. And this can be simplified to the dollar pound exchange rate of 4.8666 US dollars per British pound. The US dollar and the British pound were the only convertible currencies. By convertible, we mean widely accepted in international trade. To increase its money supply, a nation had to acquire more gold. Notice that we are using USD to denote the US dollar and GBP to denote the British pound. These are 3-character ISO currency codes set up by the International Standards Organization. The first 2 characters refer to the country code, whereas the last character refers to its currency. The first time period ended in 1913 due to the First World War. It became very difficult to move gold around to make payments and receive payments for trades during the war. The second time period was known as the period of interwar years because it took place between the 2 world wars. During this period, the United States fixed the value of the dollar at 35 US dollars per ounce of gold. The British pound was no longer convertible. That means traders stopped accepting the British pound for international trades. So the value of the US dollar changed from 20.67 US dollars per ounce of gold to 35 US dollars per ounce of gold from first time period to the second time period. Countries started to print money without acquiring more gold because they had to fund the Second World War. The third time period was the year 1944 itself. The Bretton Woods Agreement was reached in 1944 between 44 allied nations. Participating countries pledged to fix their currencies to the US dollar. The United States agreed to fix the dollar to 35 US dollars per ounce of gold. Thus, gold was replaced with the US dollar as the global currency. This placed the United States in a dominant economic position. Also in 1944, As a part of the Bretton Woods Agreement, the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, was created. The IMF was created to help countries with economic issues by lending them funds. The World Bank was created also in 1944 to provide loans to countries for infrastructure projects. By infrastructure projects, we mean building roads, building bridges, building hospitals, and so forth. Both the IMF and the World Bank are headquartered in Washington, D.C. The fourth time period started in 1944 and ended in 1973. In 1971, President Nixon abolished the Bretton Woods Agreement to fund the Vietnam War. He basically said that the U.S. would not keep its agreement to fix the value of the dollar to $35 per ounce of gold. So the dollar was devalued to 42.22 US dollars per ounce of gold. The International Monetary Fund, the IMF, created the special drawing rights, or SDRs. SDRs were created to supplement gold and dollar reserves because the supply of dollars and gold was not enough for the countries that had pledged to fix the value of their currencies to the US dollar. Let's talk about the special drawing rights. The special drawing rights are a claim against basket of currencies but not actual currencies. The IMF reviews the SDR components every 5 years. In 2016, the Chinese yuan was added to the basket as the new component. The fifth and the current monetary system is referred to as an eclectic monetary system, which means there is a wide variety of exchange rate systems. A country can have a fixed exchange rate, a floating exchange rate, or a combination of the two. A country will choose the type of exchange rate system that is best suited for its economic priorities, such as inflation rate, unemployment rate, government debt, etc. In a fixed exchange rate system, the exchange rate is fixed or pegged to a single currency or a basket of currencies. An advantage of the fixed exchange rate system is that it provides some protection against inflation. International trade is likely to grow due to the predictability of exchange rates. When exporters, importers, and investors know the value of their future transactions, they develop confidence in that country's economy. The central bank of a country with fixed exchange rates sets the par value of its currency and pledges to maintain the par value in the market. A currency will drop in value in the market if there is a lack of demand for it. So to raise the value of its currency in the market, the central bank will create a demand for its own currency by buying its own currency and selling its foreign exchange reserves. A currency will rise in value if the demand is greater than the supply. The central bank will increase the supply of its currency by selling its currency and buying its foreign exchange reserves. But every country has a limited supply of reserves. So when a country runs out of reserves, it can face a crisis. When a crisis occurs, a country would have to borrow from the IMF to boost its reserves. Borrowing from the IMF is not cheap and comes with many strict conditions. The central bank of the country that has crisis may also have to devalue its currency or convert to a floating exchange rate. Here are some of the countries with the fixed exchange rates. Take a look at Bhutan's currency. It's pegged to INR, the Indian rupee, and the Brunei dollar is pegged to the Singapore dollar. The Danish krona is fixed to the euro. Notice the Hong Kong dollar is tied to the US dollar under the currency board arrangement. We will discuss the currency board a little later. Here are some more fixed exchange rate currencies from the Bloomberg terminal. And here is the last screen of fixed exchange rate systems. Here is a small list of countries and their foreign exchange reserves. As we can see, China has a huge amount of over 3 trillion US dollars in reserves. Libya has $66 billion in reserves, which is a sizable amount. A country with small amount of reserves can run out of dollars and can face an economic crisis. Now let's discuss floating exchange rates. Floating exchange rates are market driven and their value changes rapidly in currency markets. Central banks do not intervene in the currency markets, so they don't require large reserves. Examples of floating exchange rates are US dollar, the euro, the British pound, the Swiss franc, the Japanese yen, the Australian dollar, and the Canadian dollar. Managed floats and crawling pegs combine a fixed rate and a floating rate. A managed float is more flexible rate than a crawling peg arrangement. This is a good time to talk about currency boards. A currency board is a stricter form of fixed or pegged exchange rate. Changing the par value requires a legislative approval, so it is difficult to change the par value. That means the lawmakers in a country have to pass a bill to change the par value of the currency. This can become a political issue, so it is hard to accomplish. And that's why currency board is a stricter form of fixed exchange rate. A good example is Hong Kong, as we saw on a Bloomberg terminal screenshot earlier. Generally, there is no central bank in the countries that have currency boards. Dollarization is the term used when a country officially adopts the US dollar as its own currency. This is the strictest form of fixed exchange rate. Small economies use the US dollar or some other currency as their own currency to control hyperinflation. They will choose the currency of their largest trading partner. Examples of dollarization are Panama, Ecuador, Zimbabwe. Dollarization can control hyperinflation, but it also has some disadvantages. The central bank of the dollarized country cannot be the lender of the last resort when the local banks run into financial problems. The central bank of the dollarized country cannot print US dollars. In fact, only the US government can print US dollars. The central bank of the dollarized country loses control over its monetary policy. The central bank cannot increase or decrease its money supply. Here is a summary of exchange rate regimes or systems. As you move from left to right, the system becomes more flexible. The dollarization is the strictest form. Currency board is the second most strictest form. And then we have fixed peg, crawling peg, managed float, and independent float is the most flexible form of exchange rate system. The launch of the euro in 1999 was a very important event in currency markets. Initially, the euro was the common currency of 11 nations of the European nations. Countries had to meet economic criteria such as the inflation rates, interest rates, government budget deficit, government debt to qualify to join the Eurozone. Greece met the criteria in 2001 and it joined the Eurozone then. The monetary policy of the Eurozone countries is decided by the European Central Bank, where the Eurozone countries have a seat. The United Kingdom did qualify, but it decided not to join the Eurozone. Baffling Pigs is the acronym to remember the earlier 12 members of the Eurozone. Don't laugh. I did not come up with that acronym. Let's take a look at the countries that the acronym represents. B represents Belgium, A stands for Austria, F for Finland, F for France, L represents Luxembourg, the first I represents Ireland, we have Netherlands, Germany, and the pigs represent Portugal, Italy, Greece, and Spain. Here are the 7 newer members of the Eurozone. A common question that comes up is, do I have to remember these countries for the exam? The answer is yes. My response is always going to be anything that was covered in a video lecture, in the class, or is a part of the homework assignment is likely to appear on the exam. Let's talk about the attributes of an ideal currency. In other words, what would a country like in its currency? Well, a country would like its currency to have exchange rate stability. This means a country would like its exchange rate to be predictable for growth in international trade. The country would also like to have an independent monetary policy. The country would want to have the flexibility of increasing or decreasing its money supply to combat inflation or fight recession. It would also like its currency to have full financial integration. This means it would like to have its currency acceptable in global financial markets. However, economic reality allows only 2 out of the 3 attributes. This is known as the impossible trinity. Let's try to understand the impossible trinity. Here we have the 3 attributes on the 3 sides of the triangle: the exchange rate stability, the independent monetary policy, and the full financial integration. On the angles, we are going to have exchange rate systems. So we have independent float, which is the system for the United States. We have fixed exchange rates, and China has had fixed exchange rates for a long time. And China maintains full capital controls. That means it controls the inflows and outflows of the money. Then we have the monetary union and Eurozone, and Euro is an example of the monetary union. Let's start with the United States that has independently floating exchange rate. The US can attain independent monetary policy, which as you can see is one of the sides of the triangle, and full financial integration, which is the base of the triangle. However, it cannot attain exchange rate stability because the dollar is a floating currency and its value is constantly changing in the market. China has fixed exchange rates with capital controls, and if you take a look at the 2 sides of the triangle, China can attain independent monetary policy and it can attain exchange rate stability. However, it cannot attain the base of the triangle or the 3rd side of the triangle, which is the full financial integration, because it has capital controls. The Eurozone countries have full financial integration since the euro is widely accepted in international trade and exchange rate stability, and the euro also has exchange rate stability with other nations of the Eurozone. But they don't have independent monetary policy, which is the 3rd or the left side of the triangle. And this is because their monetary policy is governed by the European Central Bank. Let's take a look at some end of the chapter problems now. We are going to start with problem 2.2. In this problem, we are given the spot rate between the Mexican peso and the US dollar to be 12.42 pesos per US dollar. And we are told that a US company, Quartzite, wants to buy 500,000 Mexican pesos from its bank on Monday. And how much will this company have to pay? and on what day to buy the 500,000 Mexican pesos. When we have a problem like this, we are either going to divide or multiply the amount by the exchange rate. You have to know when to divide and when to multiply, and it's not always obvious. So the best thing to do is to keep all the units of currencies in place when you are dividing or multiplying. For example, we have 500,000 Mexican pesos and we have the Mexican pesos in the numerator, and we have the exchange rate in the denominator, 12.42 pesos per US dollar. And you can see here nicely that Mexican peso cancels out in the numerator and the denominator. And since we have the dollar in the denominator of the denominator, mathematically it goes into the numerator, and we wind up with $40,257.65. On the other hand, suppose you try to multiply, and if you had the units of currency in place, you would immediately catch the problem, because now you wind up with peso squared 6,210,000 divided by US dollar. There is no such currency. This sounds more like physics than economics or finance, and you would immediately realize that you've made a mistake and you would go back and divide. But if you did not put the units of currency in place, you are going to wind up with a wrong answer. So it is always important to put the units of currency in place. You'll be surprised how many times I emphasize this and how many times in the exam I get a wrong answer. So always make a practice to put the units of currency in place, and you won't get a wrong answer. As far as what day the payment will be made, the settlement would occur on Wednesday. That means the transaction will be completed by Wednesday. In the financial markets, the trade settle in 2 days, unless let's take a look at problem 2.5 now. Here we have Toyota manufacturing its automobiles in Japan and exporting them to the United Kingdom. And we are told that the base platform for Toyota Tundra truck is 1,650,000 Japanese yen. And the spot rate of the Japanese yen against the British pound was 197 Japanese yen per British pound, but then it moved to 190 Japanese yen per British pound. So the question is, how does this change the price of Tundra for Toyota's British subsidiary? So this is the situation we have. We have Toyota manufacturing automobiles in Japan and exporting them to the United Kingdom. The export price in yen is 1,650,000. Our initial exchange rate is 197 yen per British pound. So first we have to find out the initial price in the British pound. So we are going to take the amount of 1,650,000 and divide that by 197 yen per British pound, as we did in the earlier problem with the Mexican peso. And here we can see that the yen cancels out, and we wind up with the initial price of the truck in British pounds to be 8,375.63. We need to find the new price when the exchange rate changes from 197 to 190. Keep in mind that the export price from Japan in Japanese yen is still the same. It's only the exchange rate that has changed, and that is going to impact the price in the United Kingdom. So we need to find, at the new exchange rate of 190 yen per British pound, what is going to be the price in pounds. So we take the price of 1,650,000, divide that by the exchange rate of 190 per British pound, and we come up with the new price in British pounds of, as we can see, the price in British pounds has gone up. The price difference is the new price minus the old price, and that is 308.52 British pounds or 3.68%. Keep in mind that when home currency rises in value, export prices are going to rise as well. So in this case, the Japanese yen has risen, and in this situation, the Japanese yen has risen. As a result, the export price of the automobile in the United Kingdom has risen. We could have analyzed that the price was going to increase without doing any type of calculation. Compare the original price of 197 per British pound to 190 per British pound. In this case, you see that the number has gone down. The number has gone down from 197 to 190. That means the pound has gone down and the yen has gone up. When the number goes down, is the currency in the denominator that goes down. And here the currency in the denominator is the British pound. And when the number goes up, the currency in the denominator goes up. Problem 2.7 provides a good review of what we discussed in the lecture. Here we are told that in December of 1994, the government of Mexico officially changed the value of the Mexican peso from 3.2 pesos per dollar to 5.5 pesos per dollar. And we need to find out what was the change in the value of the peso. Now the question we have to answer is, was this a devaluation, revaluation, appreciation, or depreciation? The rate changed from 3.2 Mexican pesos per US dollars to 5.5 Mexican pesos per dollar. The number went up from 3.2 to 5.5. The currency in the denominator is the US dollar. That means the US dollar went up and the peso went down. So this is either a devaluation or depreciation. Which one is it? To answer that question, we are going to take a look at two key words in this problem. The first key word is the government, and the second key word is officially. First of all, what does this tell you about the Mexican peso? Was it fixed exchange rate or was it a floating exchange rate? If you said it was fixed exchange rate, you are right. If you said it was a floating exchange rate, you got to go back and review the lecture. So it is the government that took the action, and it took the action officially. That tells us that this was the fixed exchange rate. And any time a country has a fixed exchange rate, it either devalues or revalues its currency. So in this problem, the answer is devaluation, because it's the government that took the action and the value of the peso declined. So this is a devaluation. Now, what we need to do is find the change in the value of the peso. By what percentage was it devalued? Before we answer that question, we are going to look at two very important formulas that we are going to be using throughout the course. The first formula applies to the currency in the denominator. Recall from your 5th grade math in elementary school that the denominator is the number at the bottom. So percentage change for the currency in the denominator equals the ending rate minus the beginning rate divided by beginning rate multiplied by 100. Formula number 2 applies to the currency in the numerator, which is the currency in the top. So for that currency, the percentage change equals the beginning rate minus the ending rate over the ending rate multiplied by 100. So going back to our problem, the rate changed from 3.2 pesos per dollar to 5.5 pesos per dollar. And the peso is in the numerator. So which formula are we going to use? Formula number 1 or formula number 2? It is going to be formula number 2 because we are interested in finding the value of the currency that is in the numerator. So our percentage change is going to be the beginning rate minus the ending rate over the ending rate times 100. We have percentage change equals 3.2 minus 5.5 divided by 5.5 times 100. And that comes to negative 41.82%. Remember earlier we said this was devaluation. That means the value of the peso was declining. And here you have a negative number. So it confirms our theory earlier that this was a decline in the currency. So here the percentage change is negative 41.82 and the peso was devalued. So here's a question for inquisitive minds. If you don't have an inquisitive mind, you don't need to worry about this. But you may have to answer such a question on the exam, so you better worry about it. What was the change in the value of the dollar? In this last assigned problem of the chapter, we are told that the Hong Kong dollar has long been pegged to the US dollar at 7.80 Hong Kong dollars per US dollar. When the Chinese yuan was revalued in July 2005 against the US dollar from 8.28 Chinese yuan per US dollar to 8.11 Chinese yuan per US dollar, how did the value of the Hong Kong dollar change against the Chinese yuan? Before doing our calculations, let's try to answer a couple of questions. The rate changed from 8.28 Chinese yuan per US dollar to 8.11 Chinese yuan per US dollar. So did the yuan go up or down? The answer is the yuan went up because the dollar is the currency in the denominator. So when the number goes down from 8.28 to 8.11, it is the currency in the denominator that goes down. This means the yen went up, or rather the yuan went up. And the second question is, was this a pegged or a floating rate? Well, we were told the exchange rate was revalued. We already discussed that when you have the fixed exchange rate, you would have a revaluation or a devaluation. This means this was a pegged exchange rate. So here we are told that 7.80 Hong Kong dollars equals 1 US dollars, and also initially 8.28 Chinese yuan equal 1 US dollar. So we can equate the Hong Kong dollar and the Chinese yuan. So 7.80 Hong Kong dollar equals 8.28 Chinese yuan. So we can get an exchange rate between the Chinese yuan and the Hong Kong dollar as 8.28 Chinese yuan per 7.80 Hong Kong dollars, and that comes out to 1.0615 Chinese yuan per Hong Kong dollar. And after the revaluation, the Hong Kong dollar is still at 7.80, but this time 8.11 Chinese yuan equal 1 US dollar. So we again equate 7.80 Hong Kong dollars. We again equate 7.80 Hong Kong dollars to 8.11 Chinese yuan. And now we get an exchange rate between the Chinese yuan and the Hong Kong dollar of 1.0397. So as you can see here, the Hong Kong dollar has gone down. So we want to calculate the percentage change in Hong Kong dollar. And which formula are we going to use? Are we going to use formula 1 or formula 2? Our beginning rate was 1.0615 Chinese yuan per Hong Kong dollar. Our ending rate is 1.0397 Chinese yuan per Hong Kong dollar. We want to find the percentage change in Hong Kong dollar, which is the currency in the denominator, and we are going to be using formula number 1 that we had discussed earlier. So the percentage change in the Hong Kong dollar equals ending rate minus beginning rate divided by the beginning rate times 100, or percentage change in the Hong Kong dollar equals 1.0397 minus 1.0615 divided by the beginning rate of 1.0397 multiplied by 100, and it comes out to negative 2.05%. We did some analysis earlier and we noticed that the Hong Kong dollar had gone down, and here we are getting a negative number, which confirms our analysis. So let's summarize what we have learned in this chapter. So we discussed that the exchange rates can be fixed, floating, or some combination of the two. We also discussed that to boost the value of its currency, the central bank of a country would buy its own currency by selling foreign exchange reserves. Floating exchange rates are market driven. When the home currency appreciates, the exports of that country become costlier, and understanding the two formulas for percentage change calculations is going to be very critical for your success in this course.